Welcome to Amplify, the personal brand business show. Today on the show, Bob is speaking with Charles Alexander.
Somebody else can do the same task you're doing for 20% of what your hourly rate is, and they can do it just 80% as well. That's something you ought to be doing 100% of the time. And I get that if you're early in your business and you don't make enough to outsource yet, don't. But as soon as you can, you will never look back. Once you find the right person, that's one of those first moves you make that make you really feel like a business owner.
Hi there and welcome back to the Personal Brand Business Show. My name is Bob Gentle, and every week I speak to incredible people who share their secrets to building, marketing and monetizing your expertise and the mindset you need for your business to grow and thrive. If you're new to the show, then while you still have your device in your hand, that's now, take a second to subscribe. That way you won't miss a single thing. So when I have people come into my world, whether that's through a Facebook group or any other way, I always try and find out what it is that causes them the most challenge. Is it mindset? Is it technical things? Is it productivity? And an astonishing number of people will tell me it's productivity. And this is really what we're going to be focusing in on today. This week, I am delighted to welcome Charles Alexander to the show. Charles, welcome.
How are you, my friend?
I am very well. It's late in the day for me. You Americans
what time is it
keep
for you?
me up. It's 6:30 p.m. So I've had dinner.
My God.
I know. So for the listener who's meeting you for the first time, can you maybe just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and the kind of work you do?
Gotcha. I am Charles Alexander. I am over in the States, specifically speaking in the Tennessee or Nashville area, home of country music. And what I do is pretty simple, but I think it's very effective. I do a lot of group coaching around the idea of doing more by doing less. Specifically, I've got a mastermind rolling. We just wrapped up on creating a 4-day work week in 90 days or less. This is what I have been working on for, years now. And it's something that's pretty near and dear to my heart. And I will be doing this until I'm not doing anything.
So I think the idea of a 4-hour work week, not 4-hour work week, that's a different thing.
4 day. Yeah. If you can get Tim Ferriss on here, brother, that'd be awesome.
Well, stretch goals.
Yeah.
I think he's maybe bored of talking about that now, though.
He probably is.
The 4-day work week is possibly more realistic for most of us.
Correct.
It tends to polarize people. Some people will think, oh, you know what, I can't possibly do that. That's just lazy. I've got far too much to do. I'm far too important. And time is far too important for me to not work on one of those days. There's another group of people who just hear that and they think that sounds amazing. But very few people actually manage to achieve it. And
Correct.
It does take a lot of intention. I'm down to 4.5 days.
Good for you, bud.
But I'm curious, I guess, to start off with, what kind of people are attracted into the 4-day work week philosophy that you have? And then later we can talk about maybe how do you make that happen in real terms?
So that's a great question, by the way, because a lot of you're right. It's a divisive issue. I have a certain group of people that I won't say they go on the full on attack, but they want to have an argument. They want to have a discussion and tell you about how it's not possible. It's not feasible. And kids these days, and nobody wants to work anymore. And what happened to, yeah. I get all that, but we live in the day and age of the Jetsons. I don't know if you ever watched that growing up, but that's where we are now. We have all the bells, all the whistles. I'll say it like this: it's one of the greatest times to ever be alive. And it's probably, bless our hearts, it's probably wasted on one of the most befuddled generations. We are just overwhelmed, overworked, over everything. And it's easier than ever. So the type of person that usually buys into it is somebody that has kind of unplugged from the matrix, so to speak, and they have realized, even though they are the king of the castle and everything has to go through them, they're also the bottleneck and they're kind of exhausted. So the average person I work with, they've hit their monetary goals. They got the income they want. They've got the business that they want by and large. They're helping people. And then they're also checking email at 9 p.m. at night. They are working most weekends. They are missing out on kids' activities. They are not getting to go on a date with their spouse. The vacation they planned that they put off is still put off, and they have kind of reached a wall, so to speak. Burnout's too strong of a word, but they're getting to that point. Those are the people I generally work with. The other half that love the idea that everyone has to come to them for the answer, that I won't say narcissistic, because we all have the idea that if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. But the people who are still clinging to that, hanging on to that, I repel those people, thank goodness, and we don't work together.
So there's a lot to unpack there. I think I can see that superficially the path to a 4-day work week through a bit of rationalization and productivity and just being slightly more efficient is vaguely straightforward when you have a traditional brick and mortar style business where you have other people looking after the majority of the fulfillment in your business.
Yeah.
If you're somebody like a coach or a consultant, somebody who by and large earns when they're operational, again, from the outside, it looks, and I say this thinking about myself as well, it looks harder. You feel like you've got less margin. And I think I'd be curious to hear from your perspective. You can hear I'm making some assumptions here. I probably have some limiting beliefs and all the rest of it. And I'm open to being schooled on this. So don't pull your punches. Tell me where's my thinking wrong?
Well, you're thinking in terms of, I don't have 10 people to outsource things to. I don't have a product-based business. I don't have a storefront that I can put other people in charge and walk away from, because the business, and I bet for a lot of your listeners, their business is probably, even their URL is probably their name of some way, shape, form, or fashion. How can I not be available 24/7?
You're hearing
my clients need me 24/7, which is a big myth I generally like to bust. In terms of how does an agency owner do it? How does a coach do it? How does a solopreneur do it? There's a starting point. And I usually have to work quite a bit with people to undo years and years of programming. I've got it still built into myself. However, some of the first things you have to look at in order to do this is, who am I surrounding myself with? And I know that sounds cliche to say, but it is worn like a badge of honor. At least here it is. If I say, "Hey, Bob, what have you been up to?" And Bob says, "Well, I've just been so what?
Busy.
I've just been so busy. I've just going 24/7. You know how it is. We're just going. But man, we wear that like some weird badge of honor. To me, I always make the analogies or examples of, fitness or financial. If it was fitness, and I would say, "Hey, Bob, I don't know, let's change the topic. What have you been eating lately?" Bob says, "Well, I've just been stuffing myself full all the time. I'm just going to all nonstop buffets. I can't quit eating. I've put on 500 pounds. I'm just eating so much." We think, "Oh, Bob's got a problem. This is not okay." But that's the same concept. We need to fill our bodies with a few good things each day and then, move on with our lives. And in terms of running our business is a very similar concept. We don't need to be 24/7 busy. And in fact, it's like going to the Golden Corral buffet, or you guys may be smart, not even have these massive.
I have an imagination.
We're American, brother. We love to eat. It's a bad concept. It doesn't work. You will hit a wall. You will burn out. I mean, even if you were to look at it, let's say from a financial standpoint, "Hey, Bob, what have you been spending your money?" "Oh, I've spent all my money. I'm just so broke. I've just been spending. And you think, Bob's he's doing this wrong. This is not good at all. But when it comes to somebody's time and their health and their well-being, you can't put them on a weight scale. You can't check out their personal balance sheet or credit score. So they can almost lie to themselves about what kind of shape they are in, so to speak. So when I say you want to start down this path, don't try to do it on your own, because everyone else they're bought in, or "I'm busy," and that's all there is. So you want to find other people that are like-minded, that are kind of thinking, "Ugh, I don't want to do this anymore." So do it in, that's the only reason I started a mastermind, because I was tired of trying to do this on my own and trying to help people on a one-on-one basis. So find other groups of people that kind of think like that. And then once you do that, and you've got some other people to rely on and hold you accountable and bounce ideas off of, before you ever start trying to cut anything, you have to set some goals. And I know that might also come off as cliche, but when I say set goals in this particular case, you have to set a goal of what you want your hours to look like each week, what days you want to work, and then what you're going to do with that free time. I can't tell you how big of a transformation that makes in people once they solidify that in their mind. Because if they don't have that, as soon as they get a little busy, they'll forego their free time because it's not, they don't know what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. I think for me, that's been a big game changer, is if I'm making that time to take off, then it has to be used with more intention than was required for actually freeing it up. Because if it's not, it's just waste. It's just more waste.
It's doom scrolling. It's watching Netflix trailers. It's frittered away. Great book, by the way. On topic. 4,000 Weeks. God, I forgot the author, but man, it's a real eye opener in terms of how much time you have on planet Earth and what you're trying to do with it. But the concept is, and I just, I've just worked with somebody on this, and she was talking about, Charles, I freed up some time. And then I almost didn't know what to do. She said, but luckily we'd went through that exercise. She even wrote it down and, drew like make-believe buckets of what she wanted to do with her life. She said, I sat down and read a book. I didn't remember I was allowed to read a book, but I had free time, read a book, and it was amazing.
So you speak about masterminds getting together in groups.
Sure.
And everybody's heard this phrase that your income rises to the level of the 5 people you spend most time with. But what they don't appreciate is that that's true of many, many things. It's true of your appreciation of what's possible for you.
Correct.
It's your appreciation of your own potential. It's your ambition. It's your willingness to step outside your comfort zone. And it's everything is easier with fellow travelers. If you're trying to do these, I often use the analogy of the hero's journey. The hero never goes into the big battles on their own. They've all
That's right. They have the guide. Yeah.
And suddenly beating the boss is easy when you've got 5 people with you.
That's right.
But you also can't transform alone. That's the important part. No change happens on your own.
You haven't interviewed anybody on this podcast and you asked them how they became a success, and they said, well, Bob, I just did it all by myself.
Yeah.
I just trudged this lonely road with just me. Quick takeaway for anybody watching, listening. If you really want to start doing more by doing less, and do 2 things. First, write down, pen to paper, what do you want your ideal work week to look like? What days do you want to work? What hours do you want to work? And then if that's shorter than what you do now, cool. What do you want to do with some of that free time? And, put them in, like I said, put them into categories, but I want to spend more time with my family, but get granular. What does that mean? I got 3 kids at home, 15, 13, 12, 11. I want to play more basketball with Lane. I want to listen to Lily, sing more of, She Goes to Voice. Hear her sing, watch Ava dance, take my wife out on dates, and then kind of you got several buckets: faith, family, friends, health, well-being. Hiking is a surprisingly big one. I don't know if people actually hike here like we talk about, but it's the concept. Do those 2 things. And then when you start getting busy, you'll figure out, well, this is what I'm comparing it to. This is what I could be doing if I decide to check email tonight.
I think what springs to mind as you're speaking as well is, so Mike Michalowicz is very well known for the profit first.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks about the tube of toothpaste analogy, that any task will grow to fill the available space. Any resource, when it's finite, will last longer than when it's infinite. So when we have a full tube of toothpaste, we use lots of toothpaste. When we have a quarter of a tube of toothpaste, suddenly we can make that last quarter last for the same amount of time as we made the previous 2/3.
Yeah.
My math is all messed up, but you get the point.
Yeah, it's Parkinson's law in full effect. Yeah. That came from your side of the world, not mine. But yes, I quote it regularly.
Yeah, and I think this is what I think a lot of people don't appreciate. So nuts and bolts. Other than being intentional about what they want to use this time for, what do you find are the most common, I would say, mind hacks or productivity processes that you feel everybody maybe takes for granted, doesn't properly implement, or they're maybe just the Charles Alexander secret sauce? What do you regularly turn to?
I'll tell you what, something that I do that's different from most people. And I'll tell you what, I'll make this a short and sweet story. Back during the pandemic, And I know everybody's tired of talking about it. I am too. But I was, working from the house, busier than I had ever been, trying to help people navigate when they should open, what the rules are, how to get some money from the government. And it was a nightmare. At the same time, we're also learning how to homeschool while the school is learning how to help you homeschool. And I remember one specific day, I got this big to-do list in front of me and I'm knocking it out. Oh, Bob, I am the time management guru. I am crushing it. And then one by one, my kids keep coming in and interrupting me. And, like the oldest one was frustrated. She said, Dad, I got to get on this thing called Google Classroom. I don't know what that is. Me neither. So finally got her logged in, shut the door. Then the middle one comes in and she's, almost in tears. Daddy, this iPad won't work. Oh, yeah, baby, it's not plugged in. And y'all played on it all last night. So we plug it in. She's on. The last one was my first grader. God, he needed to get on. Daddy, I got to get on this thing called Zoom. Zoom. Okay. Bob, the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life is watching 20 first graders enter a Zoom room for the first time. Man, all you see was like the top of their heads, one of them streaking by with no shirt. Anyways, shut the door, locked it, and I'm just back on my list. Crush my list. Well, the next day, my list was just there again. It was a brand new list. I'd been interrupted all day. I was tired, frustrated, got so productive, but I had no clue what I had been doing, if that makes sense. You ever get to the end of the day like, I was so busy. Well, I don't know. First thing I work with people to do more than anything else is to figure out where their time is currently going. For years, I taught this backwards. I taught it wrong. Block off your time, Bob. Make sure you find the priorities that matter the most to you and you block them off and don't let anything else interrupt, which sounds great until life kicks in and then a customer calls, an employee flakes out, whatever tech stack you got, the middle of it just explodes overnight. The zaps quit zapping, it's frustrating. So what I've learned to do is to take people and start having them do the painful task of figuring out where their time is going before we start blocking and eliminating and doing everything else. Because without that, we're trying to set goals without knowing what we're currently doing. I'll go back to my fitness and, financial analogy. Anytime I want to get into shape, as soon as Christmas is over with, brother, I've been on like a 2-week bender between Halloween for here, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and I put on some weight and I want to get back into the gym and get into shape. And so many times I do the same thing everyone else does. I just hit the treadmill, pick up weights, start quote unquote eating right. And then, within 2 weeks, I've lost a couple pounds, but then I get frustrated and quit. Why? I have no idea how many calories I was consuming before or how many calories I'm burning now. And I know that's a simplistic way to put it. You got somebody out there tracking macros, his head just exploded. I apologize. But taking that simple concept. Now what I do is I use an app on my phone called MyFitnessPal. So I start tracking, the calories I'm eating. And that thing knows every type of food on planet Earth, how many calories it is. And then I start tracking, with my Fitbit, which, connects to the FitnessPal. How many calories am I burning? So I can kind of start measuring out, okay, that's what I've been doing. So now I know what I need to do going forward. I need to cut this, add this to get to the weight or the goal that I want. People never do that with their time. So they start going out of their way and start eliminating wildly. I'm not going to check email, but once every 2 days, and I'm not going to ever go to this networking meeting again. And I'm going to hire 4 VAs. All that sounds great. And you're going to do some damage, but you're going to be just like I am come February. You're going to get pissed off, quit, and you're going to have to start all over again. So the little hack Charles Alexander says, which is not unique, figure out where your time is going. And there's tools online to do it. Toggle, there's Clockify. If you have to, scribble it all down on pen to paper. I use in my mastermind and some of the people I work with, I use, a spreadsheet, which is painful. And I have people that just say, I just can't do it. This is the thing you have to do. Once we do that for a couple of weeks, not for the rest of your life, then we can make some progress.
So I use an app called Clockify, and I go through this process once every 6 months or so, because I find that I've heard this bandied around it. You don't need to manage your time. You need to manage your energy. But our energy all has to go places, and it gets invested and it gets spent. And then sometimes it gets invested wisely and sometimes it gets invested poorly. And a lot of people treat their energy like a day in the casino. Sometimes they get lucky. And then there's other people who spend their energy like Warren Buffett. They just put their money where they know it's going to accumulate.
That's right.
It's going to multiply. And this time, not so much monitoring, but this bringing intention and insight and light to where your time is going.
Sure.
It allows you to see where your energy is going. And sometimes you realize these are not good investments. And it can be sometimes very worthwhile looking activities, but you think,
absolutely. And when you're doing that and you're on Clockify, and another great one is RescueTime that kind of runs in the background if you're stuck to your laptop all day, and it'll pop up at the end of the day and tell you how you spent your time because it's looking at your browser history or what apps you're opening like Word or Excel. But again, once you identify that, so just like I said, we just finished up a mastermind and somebody, one of the big things that somebody saved hours a week. I was like, I didn't realize I am in my inbox a third of the day.
Yeah.
The tool that was supposed to make us more productive than ever is derailed us more than ever because it's just a to-do list that everyone else is giving you. But she didn't realize that, and she was managing her time pretty well. And like Bob just said, all of that energy invested into opening, reading, marking in red, forwarding. Some folks here will print an email. What do I do with this? Don't do anything. Wait till the end of the day. I mean, if it's a client that's on fire, I got it. You can prioritize, but most of it's junk. So that's just an example. So your energy needs to be spent, and that's one of the second or third or fourth things I'm at this point. Is what are your priorities supposed to be? That's why I like tracking your time first, because I'll ask people, what are your priorities? And I get these. I mean, they're cute, but these Oprah Winfrey frou-frou. Well, my priorities are, and when I see people start glancing up into the sky, like, it's just great customer service. It's just spending a lot of time with my clients. And then people will use buzzwords, authenticity and just adding massive value. Like that's not, show me your calendar where it says add massive value. That's not a thing. I mean, it's a culture, it's a mindset. That's great. But we're talking about the 3 or 4 things you do in your business that make everything else go really well. For like you, Bob, if you do really great podcast work, if you do great posting what you're accomplishing or who you're working with online, that brings in more clients. If Bob just says, well, I just do great work with my clients and I just, I just do a lot of smart investing of my time, that's great, but it has to be a task, a thing you do that makes everything else fall into place. Once you identify what those are, the high leverage activities that you enjoy doing that make everything else fall into place, then we can start adding those to the calendar and blocking it off. But you've got to figure out where your time is going, and you've got to figure out what those items are. I
think one thing that I definitely noticed when I started tracking time was I'm a massive people pleaser. And I was putting a lot of time. I had a really bad habit. And you might argue this is a good habit. But whenever I see a problem and I see somebody needs help, I jump in to fix it. Right. I'm not necessarily the best person to do that, but I can do it. And on the surface, you would think superficially, that's great. Bob's an awesome guy. He's great to work with.
Yeah.
But because I've put so much time into that, I no longer have time to properly pay attention to what are the little ninja points that I could provide for my client that would provide the massive value rather than superficial, well, I just made a little problem go away for you. And I could go on and on this.
Yeah. And so, you're right. Find those high leveraged items, whatever those are for you. And I could, I know we got a limited time. I could go on and on where I've helped clients identify little things that they do that they took for granted. That's really, if they spent more time on it. And agency owners and coaches, a lot of the folks you listen to, it's going to be, it might be speaking, it might be webinars, it might be content creation. And once you do those well, it kind of fills the pipeline, gives you the right people, repels the wrong one, and that makes your life a little better. So then you've got a list of all these other things. What do I do with them? And at that point, I tell, that's when we start eliminating. That's when we start batching. That's when we start automating. That's when we start outsourcing. And you don't do it all in one week. You pick something line by line. So you mentioned a minute ago, Warren Buffett. One of the famous quotes he had is that the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. One of the first things I like to work with people on is let's eliminate some stuff. Let's look at that list you put together and start thinking of, well, do I have to do all of these? And a lot of those, spending a third of your day in inbox. Not good. Tell you where another cheat code one is. Pick up your phone sometime. My gosh, if I ever add another big component to what I'm doing, I may become the screams at everyone to get off his digital lawn. You're on your phone too long, guy. Especially here where I live, everybody, well, these kids these days and their phones, and they're right. But the average Gen X or baby boomer is spending about 5 hours a day on their phone. We don't have, there's not that much good stuff in there.
You know what I love about that? Because I used to run a business. I employed a reasonable number of people. And I grew up on the phone. I'm a screaming introvert, very shy, but
Sure.
I got really comfortable with calling people and taking calls. For me, it was second nature. But I realized that for other people, it's really challenging. It's really they feel it's confrontational. And if you're comfortable making a call, it becomes a superpower. Not just because people are a little bit startled and saying, wow, you just called me. That's really cool. But also, as you described, you can spend a week backwards and forwards with emails, but trying to schedule a call.
Sure.
Or you could just call and have a dialogue, rapid, and then you've got the conclusion and you can move on very, very quickly. I called somebody today. And for me, that's a bit of a thing. I just called somebody out of the blue today. It doesn't happen very often. Where's the world gone? It's the most productive thing.
Well, you're using the app on our personal devices that folks forget exist, and that is the actual telephone piece of the puzzle. I get into discussions with this with my wife, and my kids are like, they'll text me something that's urgent. Said, look, they got this new app on our digital device that will let you get in contact with me right away, and we'll have a real conversation in real time. Don't text me, hey, stop at the store on the way home. We need milk ASAP. I'm halfway home. That didn't do me any good. But for any of you iPhone users, go under settings, go under screen time and figure out what other apps you're using and how long you're using them. I think if it's Android, it's called digital well-being. But the concept, again, I just finished up working with a bunch of people, saved one of my clients 15 hours a week. That's 2 full days that were spent mindlessly scrolling. She had no concept that she was doing that until we started looking at it. Well, what are you using it for? When do you use it? Why do you use it? And that's a big thing. We've gotten where we use digital devices just as a soother anytime we have a little calm moment there, which is a different topic, different day. But you have to start eliminating some things. So that's a big item on the list. Once you figure out what you're doing, stop doing some stuff.
So I think people listening will probably fall into one of two camps. There will be the business owner who has been in business for a while and is looking at a 4-day work week as something that they aspire to. And I think what we can take from this conversation is that if that's what you want to do, if you stop doing some things and start doing some other, focus on the priorities, you can achieve this. There are others who might be in an earlier season in business who listen to the idea of a 4-day work week and they think, I just don't feel the need. But what I like about the conversation we're having is this isn't necessarily about the 4-day work week. Correct. This is about choice, and this is about pace, and this is about finding margin in life and the opportunity to control your work-life balance and not be controlled by it. I'm interested to hear from you. There's an assumption that the people you work with are sort of my age, slightly jaded, a bit fed up in business. Although to my listeners, I am neither of those things.
He is his
But
age
I'm interested to hear about any experience you have with younger people who are maybe looking at, and again, I'm stereotyping terribly here.
Yeah, it's okay.
People who are in an earlier season of business, they're really hungry, but they just want a different flow in business.
Yeah. So in that realm, a lot of the people I work with have met their financial goals, so to speak. They're not independently wealthy, but they're making the money they wanted to make. And if you're at a point where you're closer to the start than the end, and you don't, to bail you out there, you don't have to be young. You can be my age, older. I'm 48, of where you're trying to, get things going. And I tell people, you're not 4-day work week ready yet. Once you've got to hit your revenue level, but there's so many things that I like to talk about that still impact you. And as you get started out, start being really mindful, start tracking all the different things that you are doing. And then once you get a full week, even though you're not at your full revenue yet, you can start looking at, well, what I'm already doing that's already a bad habit that I can eliminate. What are the top leverage items I should be doing more of? And I'll put those, I'll batch those together, so to speak, which is like another cheat code. I'm going to have a full day of just sales calls. I got a full day of just content creation. I got a full day of just data entry toward the end of the week that I can't afford yet. And then look at what else. Well, look at some of the online tools that we have that you can use to automate certain aspects of your business. And I do love person-to-person contact. You're talking about picking up a telephone. Man, that's awesome. Reach out to somebody independently, individually, but there's still other aspects of what you do that can be automated. And we have every tool known to mankind, every scheduling tool, email marketing tool, data entry tool, just they are there. And a lot of them are still really inexpensive. And then once you finally start to make a few bucks to where you can reinvest in your business, one of those first things you will want to look at is getting a little help. I mean, it doesn't have to be a full-time employee. Get a virtual assistant that lives thousands of miles away. That a good rule of thumb, if somebody else can do the same task you're doing for 20% of what your hourly rate is, and they can do it just 80% as well, that's something you ought to be doing 100% of the time.
Yeah.
That's real math.
Yeah.
you can run that equation backwards and forwards. But and I get that if you're early in your business and you don't make enough to outsource yet, don't. But as soon as you can, you will never look back. Once you find the right person to help you navigate LinkedIn replies or enter contact information into your CRM, whatever it is, that's one of those first moves you make that make you really feel like a business owner.
I remember when I started tracking my time, I was running an agency at the time. And I think this is what I would love people to take from my personal experience. My revenue streams fell into two categories. So there was digital marketing work, which was retainers. And then there was website projects, which were project revenue. Mm-hmm. And the website projects were always hard work and time consuming. And when I started tracking my time, I realized that 80% of my time was going into the website side of things. But the digital marketing stuff was making most of the money. And I realized, you know what? I'm putting almost all my time into this that's making fairly unpredictable, fairly unprofitable money, mm-hmm. and just causing me lots of distress. And I've got this other part of my business that I'm being held back from that's super profitable and that brings me joy to do. And once I understood that, I could make a big change in the business that profoundly changed my future. Yeah. It profoundly changed my sense of well-being. It had some negative impacts on a few other people, sure, but it was my business and it changed my life. So, and that simple insight of knowing where my time was going, being able to value that, project that into the future, it made a tremendous difference. So I am all on board. And honestly, that one change is what leads to it being now, if I'm not on a call with a client or do something like this, I can relax, which I never really could before.
Yeah. Now look at you, Bob. Good job.
So I am fully on board with what you're talking about. If there's anybody listening thinking, I need more margin or I want a whole day back, go and check out Charles. It's well worth it. If people are listening to you, they're thinking, okay, I want to get a bit closer to what Charles is doing. Where can they find you? Where do you like to hang out?
The easiest place to find me is LinkedIn. My profile is Your Charles Alexander. I'm the guy that looks a lot like Bob without the cool glasses, and I got a little facial hair instead. I host regularly Q&A LinkedIn Live sessions. They are not sales pitches. They are bring on really simple, 4 or 5 people, and hold court for about 45, 50 minutes. It is a little personal, so you can't hide behind a black box, but we just go around the room, figure out what some of the things you're working on. What do you want to learn? What are some of the things you're struggling with? I answer them one-on-one, let other people in the group participate, get to hear from other folks. To me, that is the biggest bang for anybody's buck. It's the easiest thing to do. It's the most helpful thing to do. So find me there, sign up for a live Q&A, and we'll get you as much help as humanly possible.
And you also have a podcast, Do More by Doing Less.
I have a podcast, Do More by Doing Less, in which I've had great guests like Bob Gentle.
And yeah, thank you very much for your time. I think I'm going to have you back because we've been very high level and there are some areas that I would love to burrow into a little deeper.
We were blocking and tackling today. Next time we'll get into the X's and the O's.
Yes. So thank you very much for your time. You have been great fun.
Bob, I appreciate it, friend. You have a good evening.
I forgot one thing.
You got a last question you have to ask
me. Honestly, I'm knife's edge this week.
Huh?
What's one thing you do now that you wish you'd started 5 years ago?
I think we just talked about a lot of it. So 5 years ago, I was still blocking time and then trying to make everything work backwards. And then it's been over the last several years. Well, I finally figured out that I need to identify what I'm doing, identify my priorities, and make everything else work based off those. And I really wish I'd have started teaching this about 4 or 5 years ago. I had the material together, and I kept thinking, I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to do this one day. And I'm doing it. There was no reason for me to wait. I was waiting for it to be perfected. It will never be perfected. I wish I would have started teaching this stuff and living it out more 5 years ago, man. I wouldn't be on the podcast. Bob would be out, in an island somewhere.
That's a really good answer. Charles, thank you so much for your time. You have been awesome.
Thanks, friend.
Thank you at home for listening. That does bring us to the end of another episode. If you did enjoy the show, then I would welcome you to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. That's 5 stars. And share the show with just one person. If you did enjoy the show, you will love the Personal Brand Business Roadmap. Just visit amplifyme.agency and drop your treasured details into the pop-up that will accost you as soon as you arrive there. And I will send you a copy. Yeah, thanks for listening. I will see you next time.